This week's special guest, Councillor Matthew Norris. Welcome to From the Council Gallery. Guest at the moment is Councillor Matthew Norris, one of 4 councillors representing Ward 1 on Shoalhaven City Council. Matthew's a locally raised Labor councillor, first elected in 2021 and re-elected in 2024. He received 4,181 first preference votes at the 2024 election. His background includes working in locally owned small business. His stated priorities have included financial sustainability, roads, employment and better transport connections. Matthew served as an Assistant Deputy Mayor from October 2024 until September 25. During this term, he has sometimes voted with councillors outside Labor and on several important matters departed from them. So tonight, we will examine those decisions and principles behind them and what they tell us about his approach to public office. So Matthew, maybe over to you just to open up. Did I get all that right, or did I get it wrong?
It sounds a bit more important than it actually is when you say it all like that.
That's what we're here for. Look, before we get into it, we've got a couple of disclosures to make. As under the current investigation of OLG, it's important that you declare things up front. Before we begin, I need to declare my disclosure. I was a member of the Australian Labor Party in the 1970s. And again, after retiring down here to the South Coast, I joined the Ulladulla branch. I resigned my membership in 2021. That past membership does not determine our questions or prevent us from critically examining the public record of a Labor representative. He's been advised of the broad areas we intend to cover. Maree, your declarations?
Yeah, I joined the Australian Labor Party in 1985 with a brief defection for 3 years while I served overseas in Los Angeles. Other than that, I'm a long-serving Labor member and a long-term branch member. And I should also declare that I was a staffer in Canberra for 13 years and worked for the federal member here, the Whitlam federal member, Stephen Jones, for 2 years as well. Now retired.
Before I start, I just want to say that I'm here in my own private capacity and none of my reviews here reflect council. I'm purely speaking from myself. Just need to get that out of the way because otherwise we'll find someone who'll have an issue with it.
Yes.
So what would I like to see in a councillor? I want to see someone who's passionate about the community for the right reasons. Now, what are the right reasons? We all bring passion about the community to what we do. And I don't think that's different from any of the 13 current councillors. But what I do see is councillors who, rightly or wrongly, bring their own self-prejudice before decisions they're making. And that's what I feel is an obstacle on council at the moment. So I would love to see people who are involved in community. Bring people from the arts, bring people from sport, bring people from different backgrounds, because you need to have diversity there. That's the most important part of council. You need to have that diversity, but you need to have people who have lived different lives. That helps with having a great cross-section of council who bring different strengths. Like there are parts of council where I'm not the strongest. I'll admit that. But there are other people on council who will bring so much more strength in that area. So I'd really like to see a diverse range of candidates. I'd love to see some younger people. Just as a young person, I'd love to people around my age. These are future. This is our future. And the decisions we're making for the future are so important. And you just can't wait until you're in your 50s to make these decisions. You need to get involved younger.
Yeah, similarly, I 100% agree with Matthew there. I think the one thing we suffer from across a lot of councils, particularly regional councils, is a clear problem with an elder, a group of elders. And that means they also tend to stick around a bit longer. So they run, they recontest, and it doesn't open up the way for newer, younger members. And I think that's a real problem we have to address. That would be my clear issue, would be that case of sometimes the elders who've been on council too long need to get out of the way and make way for people like Matthew and people with the passion that he has to come on board. And then we can provide mentoring in the background. But clearly we should be opening up the way. Hanging around for too long is a bad thing for councils.
Yeah, there's a very good book out at the moment called Going On, and it's about baby boomers not being prepared to give up. So it's quite a good read, and I might even put a link to it on the podcast. So Matthew, what should voters examine beyond campaign slogans and photographs and promises, which we seem to get an awful lot of.
You do. And I think that's the thing. You need to look at the priorities that you hold dear, because I would never have got involved with the Labor Party if I didn't see myself in that party. And one of my big things for joining was that I thought I'd be more annoying inside the tent than outside of it, just yelling.
Yep. I mean, I'd concur with that. And as an ex-Labor member, I'm a very strong Social Democrat. So even though I'm no longer a party member, I'm certainly a dedicated, lifelong Social Democrat. And I pick up your point. For example, Gemma Tribe on council, ex-Liberal, she's doing a marvellous job as far as I can see, in my own personal opinion. So, great. Does local government experience matter, or does the chamber need people prepared to challenge established practices?
Yeah, similarly, to be fair, I thought, I had all this knowledge and I'd served in a federal government, in ministries. So I thought, council. Yeah, when someone's tapped me on the shoulder and said, we're turning in towards, would you consider running for Albion Park, which of course is partly Kiama? And I said yes, and I thought, it's probably easy. I won't have a problem there. I understand politics. It's mostly about politics. And then I got there and the sharp learning curve was, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's so much information coming at you. You're expected to absorb it within a very short time frame. The briefings are condensed deliberately in order that you can't ask the questions that you would like to, that you've probably formulated after reading the information. And if you're not familiar with the process in the chamber, which most of us aren't when we get there, it can be really quite confronting.
And I would like to touch on that point about caucusing. It's a complete fabrication. We don't do it. We can't do it. It's against the rules.
Yep.
And I've got a lot of faith in at least Labor HQ picking people. And yeah, so I
we have
that.
integrity, basically. I believe that most of us have integrity.
They did good background checks.
The other thing, which I think is also you can feed into this, is that the Labor Party has a fairly strong set of core values. So if you put people in the room who are from a Labor Party or background, they pretty well know what those core things are about. I had my wife, who was a senior public servant, a very senior public servant, was in the room with a Labor government, and there were some discussions in cabinet about a particular issue. And it was Julia Gillard actually said to her colleagues who wanted to do certain things, she said, hang on, aren't we the Labor Party? And they've gone, yeah, you're right. So they they moved on in the right direction. There are those core values, which is very hard in independence, where maybe they don't share those deep common threads.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my opinion.
You're not going to have that commonality like you do when you're in a party of similar viewpoints. Like when I was at state conference the other week, it's a room full of people who have got very similar values. So you're going to click on things, but you're not going to get that when you're just completely from different sides of the equation.
I do miss that sort of camaraderie from branch meetings where you could sit down and talk to anyone and you could have a very sensible conversation with some different views, but pretty much around those core Labor views.
Although, to be fair, we're not bad at robust debate within our branches and robust debate at conference either.
Oh, blood on the floor.
We're not
sure.
groupthink, and I think that's the other thing that worries me. We're certainly not groupthink. I mean,
no.
In my branch, I'm left and my rest of my branch is right. And I'm the outlier all the time. So colour is shocked, right? And that's what happens for people who don't understand politics.
It can be brutal. That's true.
It can be brutal, yeah. Just because we're all in the Labor Party doesn't mean we all agree.
That's right. So, Matthew, when you vote with the Mayor and SIG councillors, how should the public distinguish an independent decision from just support for an established voting bloc? How do you explain that when you vote with them? What's driving the issue?
An incredibly fair question. The way I feel when I'm voting with that group is usually I've come to this reasoning for a particular reason. There are a couple of issues where I won't agree with Gillian and Ben. For sure, I won't. But then there'll be some times where I've seen enough has happened, enough has transpired on a particular issue, and I'll be like, this is definitely where we need to go. And that's the one thing I do love about my particular group on council is we don't hold each other to it. We do hold each other to account, but we don't, it's not strict. It's not like you have to vote this way. That's not the way it's done. It's you will make your judgment call, and your judgment call is respected because we're all here for the same reason. So
again, a bit more disclosure. I said I campaigned for Gillian, even though I wasn't in the party. I think she's very sensible and a good member.
Just going back to Matthew talking about change or shifting votes, like sometimes you can go in briefed with an idea in your head And debate can shift your view. So you might have thought about how you see that from your own personal point of view, your own experience, and what you've been briefed on or been discussed. But then you can go into the chamber and there can be good points put across by the other side.
I won't ask Matthew to comment on this, but just as a very close observer of council, I'd have to say I don't see much good quality debate coming out of SIG. I certainly see Gemma Tribe putting up some good ones. Dufford occasionally comes up with some good points, but has Maree, the rest of them I don't see much of. The instance I see is completely wrong. Now, I'm a businessman and what we need is growth and more customers. It's just insane. But I won't ask Matthew to comment on that unless you particularly want to comment on that, Matthew.
I kind of would, actually.
Okay.
The way I see it, so if you go back and look at my first stint on council, I was always worried about saying the wrong thing for fear of losing a vote. And you see, as I mature into the role and as I grow into the role, when I'm there this term, it's not that I don't care. It's just that I'm so assured or at least comforted by my viewpoint that I'm willing to spar with someone on it. And I'll give a lot of credit to Bob and to Gemma here. They've been there before. They know what they're doing. The other councillors, they're all new. They haven't had the experience. For Patricia, Gillian, myself, Bob and Gemma, we've done this rodeo once before. The rest of them are all coming new. So it's a different set of circumstances for them. So I often don't agree with Councillor Kazmiri. That's not a lie. That's in your record, Steve. It's quite evident. But he's coming at it from a completely different viewpoint to the way I'm coming at it mine. So it's just about how we achieve that expectation.
Yeah, I accept that. And that's actually quite a good point. So you've actually helped correct an old bloke's thinking. So that's a good point, Matthew. Well done. Well done. So the special rate variation in 2024, after SIG made a fair commitment about they wouldn't do this. So you opposed the proposed special rate variation in 2024, when the council should control its finances before asking residents to pay more. 18 months later, what evidence has strengthened that position or changed the position?
I think the thing for me with rates is I came into this always looking at Shoalhaven's been always a very low rated community by standards. And the thing we've got now since COVID and all that stuff's happened, we've had a lot of people move in from out of area. So we've had a lot of people come up from Melbourne, from Brisbane, from Perth, from Sydney.
Canberra.
People have come from everywhere and they expect metropolitan level council in a region. And I tell them that stretch of road that has no houses on it, we've got to service that to get to your house. And people understand that a little bit more when it's laid out in context. But there's all these other services that we need to provide. And so when I'm looking at the rates, I'm always looking at, I've got people in Berry saying, I don't care what you put it to, I'll pay it, just make sure it works for me. And then I've got people down in Basin View and Bawley saying, I can't afford another rate. I can't afford another $2. So you've got a huge spread of the Shoalhaven and you've got to find that middle ground. For me, the rate rise that was bandied around in the election, the 44% of Labor and Greens, that was never a proposal by any councillor. It was independently put by AEC.
That's right.
It was so ludicrous that anyone would read that and believe it. So for me, it was a case of let's get our own house in order. I've said it many a time on the floor. You look after the pennies, the pounds look after themselves. And that's been a mantra in small business. It's been my mantra for everything. And so I think low on rates, but still provide a good service to our community. That's the balancing act. And you've got to make sure the levers are all moving in the right direction. It'll never be perfect. I don't ever think it will be, but you've got to make sure at least a fair...
What got me interested in starting the Eye was, in fact, the absolutely abysmal campaign launch that SIG had, where they had the now convicted rapist Gareth Ward come along, and I've got it documented. If anyone wants to sue it, if he wants to take me for defamation, go ahead. He just lied one lie after another. The 44%, then he went on to the number of staff, which was completely incorrect. The whole thing was a litany of lies. Nobody challenged it. It just off it went. The electorate had no eye on the Shoalhaven Council and nobody else. The radio, pretty much, in my view, a sort of liberal conservative viewpoint. Newspapers, I used to work in a newspaper. The newspapers here are dead. So it was a sort of uncontested field. And if the Greens and Labor put their hand up, they go, they would say that, wouldn't they? Christine Keeler, the Christine Keeler, of course you'd say that. That's what he'd say. So again, I won't ask you comment, but for our viewers, I can click that there. It was an appalling situation, and you had Wilkins and everyone else clapping what a great guy the now rapist Ward was. Terrible.
Just taking it back, I agree with all of that, by the way, but taking it back to Matthew's point about you're never going to make everyone happy, you're appealing to a large audience that are paying bills. But the thing that frustrates me across many of the councils, particularly those that are in fiscal distress right now, is the way the decisions are made and who ultimately is making them. You have a governing body, obviously, and then you have your mayor and your bureaucrats that might be working together so that the decisions that are coming into the chamber may not necessarily be benefiting the worse off of our community. I'm afraid things like, let's take an example in Shoalhaven, having a $350,000 drone show over and withdrawing a $50,000 arts grant funding arrangement. Now, where is the justice in those kind of decisions? And then it goes to, so this is brought to council. You might have a bit of an idea about it, but you're not really given a whole lot of time to put your case forward for the people at Albion Park, for instance, who aren't going to go to that Shell Cove drone show because you can't get any parking and you couldn't afford to eat at Shell Cove. So the only people that's going to benefit is tourists who just cost ratepayers more, or the shops and the various restaurants there that charge an arm and a leg. The rest of the community are going to miss out. Now, those kind of decisions really grate on me because you really don't get the argument put forward fairly.
Why was the ability of councillors to speak publicly important to you?
We're put there by the public. The public are our boss, and it is only fair that our boss gets to see why decisions were made and how decisions were made. I don't think it's really fair that a decision of that magnitude is made entirely behind closed doors. Some of it absolutely is behind closed doors territory. We're talking about salaries and stuff like that and performance indicators, but there is some stuff that the community should be able to hold their CEO accountable to. And that does not matter who gets the job. That is, even if we're talking about the head of supercars, for example, the head of F1, there needs to be some tangible sort of things about how that person is. Even the Qantas model there, but Alan Joyce, and that we need to have answers on the board for how these decisions are made. And if we look at building Badgerys Creek Airport, there's so much transparency around how decisions were made that I think the public is entitled to. And so having the ability to speak freely was important. I think it always is.
Matthew, I'd add there that I did hit up a sort of public relations management role in agriculture. And the things that we know, which it'd be interesting to see how your new strategic advisor goes and provides this advice to the mayor and the CEO. I don't know whether they're providing advice to councillors, but the thing is, we've moved on. The public doesn't want to be just advised. They want to be involved and they want. So this old 1950s model, I can say as a person who's on the UCC list, hiding, whatever, it's dead. It does them worse than if they actually just stood up and gave their version of events. So, without blowing up my own butt, I'm going to ask you this next one, and then Maree will probably come in. Do you think that councillors have sometimes been unnecessarily prevented from explaining their public decisions?
Only with the mechanism of council. And I say that in terms of how councillors are permitted to speak in a meeting. You've got your 5 minutes and that's it. And if you go and issue your own media or do something like that, you're going against the code in some way or form. So in the way that council is structured, yes, but there does need to be some limitations on how we present. That's the way it is. It's the structure of the beast. So yeah, I probably got splinters in my bum for being in the middle of the road with this one, but that's where it sits in my book.
I've been critical, and again, as both councillors, you probably have a discussion about this. I've been critical because of the OLG information on freedom of political expression. I think is pretty powerful, and basically it's saying, you stay away from breaching the code. But we saw Gemma, and I think Ben to some degree, has come out and put out little videos going, council voted this way. Now I'm going to talk about myself. My views are blah, 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 which I think is really good. I think that gives the public a lot of good insight and encourages active democracy. So I continue to really encourage councillors, and whether it's here with us on the podcast or however they want to do it, I'd encourage them to get out there and put out how they're thinking. Not breaching the code, but using that freedom of political expression because it's critical to it.
I was just going to say, at least being more transparent with the community. If they can at least express their viewpoint, would be a lot more beneficial, I reckon. 2
points for me. They're technically the only reason for going into confidential is employment matters and business matters that you run the risk of exposing a tender if you go public, right? But other than that, my feeling is that everything should be open and transparent. Those 2 things are sacred, And yes, wages and staffing, that sort of all issues around that should be a no-go.
Matthew, I'll say something and then you may want to respond. What I've seen, and I did do a GIPA on the WorkSafe or Safe Work investigation, and it was clear from that they referred to the chair in the document. This is not Steve Prothero's story. This is in documents that the bullying with Councillor Johnson largely resolved around the chair, which clearly is the mayor. I've witnessed and written about things I've seen in the chamber where it just stands out to me that it's a bit like watching the old Parliament with Bronwyn Bishop, that there's one rules for one lot and another set of rules for another. Now, I'm not asking you to comment on any of that, but how do you think and I saw Ben once fought back and took on the chair. Why don't we see more of that? Is there any reason, or what's your views on those rulings from the chair?
And I say this as a woman as well, was that I was shut down continually, and it was in quite often a brutal fashion. So I could never forget my name in a council meeting because the chair, the mayor, would say to me, Councillor Duffy-Moon, Councillor Duffy-Moon, constantly the minute I opened my mouth.
It's difficult to raise those points of orders, and we've only done it like you said, Ben did it once in a recent meeting.
I think there's been two.
I got up and forced the dissent motion that Councillor Tribe raised, and I made sure it actually happened because it wasn't being acted on immediately. And that's really only two examples I can think of.
Yeah,
the problem.
I think you're right. Yep.
The problem I have is that I have respect for the chair. I have respect for the role that the mayor's doing. And so whilst I may disagree fundamentally with the call or how it was made, I don't believe in slowing the business down just to score the point. I would rather just accept that's what's going to happen and just move on. So yeah, I think I come from a very different political school of I'm here for point scoring. That's not what I'm about. I'm about moving on the business so we can actually move on.
But when Ben, I believed, over the library issue, it was your voices of dissent and strength and arguing with that stuff that really made it go public, that really kind of gave it some traction. And I think that's an important point too, that when you can get your message across and still respect the position of the chair, but the chair has to respect the councillors too. That's a two-way street. So yes, you can respect the position and that's good. But by the same token, if you have a mayor at any council who's not respecting the councillor's right to speak or interfering with that process, then that's not right either.
Okay. We might move on to family daycare, Matthew. So in early 2025, you supported moving family daycare out of the direct council administration, departing from Councillor Tribe and Councillor Boyd. Why did you support that decision?
I did a lengthy amount of research before arriving at that point. The thing I was hearing from parents around me who I was talking to, they didn't think that was council's place, and they had other arrangements that they were using for their childcare. So for me, it was a difficult position because as a Labor councillor, I didn't want to be in a case of selling things off or stopping council services. But I needed to be bringing this budget back into line. If the other group wasn't going to do it, I needed to. So I did struggle with that one quite a bit. I stood aggressively on that, not selling off the poles and wires sort of thing in the New South Wales state government, because I've got those fundamental values. So I don't want those services we own going out. But the voices that I was hearing were just too many saying, we've got our own stuff sorted. Council's not in the business of that. Just fix my roads.
And that's a good response. But for example, now, how do you feel about, say, for example, an issue that I've got in my bonnet at the moment about sponsorship for the black tie event for the business chamber, where there's, I don't know, $25,000 or something. I think the childcare was with $90,000. What business is the council in? Is the council in the business of sponsoring black tie events for business? Is it in the business of generating tourism? What do you see as the core business of council?
The core business of council is providing the community with the services they require to go about their daily lives. So it is the roads, it is the rates. It is the roads, it's the rubbish, it's the parks, it's making sure the grass is mowed. It's the fundamental things. Now, I'll put my disclosure up. I'm going to the business awards. I go every year. Sometimes I take a council ticket. Sometimes I buy my own. Last year I had to buy my own because council didn't have one. This year they've offered councillors complimentary tickets. So full disclosure, I'm going. I go. But I find that event really helpful too, because you sometimes see the businesses that you don't interact with all the time. And so by helping them get a leg up or seeing their achievements put up on the stage, it encourages you to see how they're operating and see how their business can help the city and how the city can be best operated. Part of it is, how do we make that system work together better? How do we work better with the business chamber to enhance what services those businesses are offering for the community? Because there might be a gap in our market that we're not seeing, but by seeing a business being awarded this achievement, we can go, oh, that's where we can grab that from. A bit of networking.
I think we fundamentally disagree on that, but I appreciate your view.
I have a question. It probably is for both of you, really. Were there job losses due to that family daycare decision?
I understand. Yes, I understand. Some of them closed their doors, so they, for whatever reason, didn't go to the new provider. Now, whether that's a job loss or a personal decision by the carers, I'm not sure. Matthew, do you know?
My understanding was a couple wound up, but they were going to anyway, if not at that point later on, because they were approaching that age where they just didn't want to be involved anymore. There was, I think, 3 from memory. I could be wrong on that one. Please don't quote me. I think 3 found alternative employment, but within a different part of the system. So it wasn't.
And perhaps if I preface that question with a similar issue that happened, and as always, Labor are keen to keep jobs and keep local jobs, particularly in the community, and losing a service like that and the potential of losing jobs is obviously a big decision for councillors to have to consider too. So is the service costing the council a lot of money when times are tough? And to Steve's point, to a black tie event, weighing up that situation, I believe the job losses that occurred due to closing down of our youth centre was diabolical in light of things we were spending money on that should have been curtailed. Yeah, that's why I asked the question. It comes back to this question of balance, paying for sponsoring a black tie event versus maintaining perhaps 3 or 4 jobs, and more importantly, a service in the community that's going to get lost.
We might wind it up with this one, and that's, Matthew, if Labor and like-minded councillors held a working majority tomorrow, what's the first council decision you would expect to be reversed or substantially changed from this current SIG majority? Prayer.
That's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but there's a couple of different things that I would like to change if we had the numbers. It would be more about structure, though. It wouldn't be decisions made on the ground. It would be more about how the structure of the meetings are conducted. There's a lot of things that council will just move and it won't even get debated. It's sometimes even silly that it comes to the council floor.
Yeah.
So I think procedurally I'd like to clean up some stuff. But there's so many things out there in the community that are just fundamentals, and they are not dealt with in the way I feel is best representation of the community. And I'd like to see a lot more, it's hard to find the right word, but I'd love to see a lot more diversity in the way we approach issues. We can't use a cookie cutter approach for every single issue. It doesn't work that way. And we've got far too much of a diverse community for some different issues. So we can't be going and telling a group of, for example, we can't be saying to a group of Aboriginals, sit in a line and we're going to speak to you. So we need to be in cultural circles and stuff like that.
That's right.
And embracing the multiculturalism that is this country, because that's how we move it forward.
And you're right. I will interrupt here because you're dead right. Aboriginal Advisory Committee themselves with staff come back saying they feel like toothless tigers. That's really not appropriate. So those issues there. One other thing which I'll raise, and then I'll go to Maree and back to you for an answer, is I'm astounded when I look at some of the papers going to the councillors. I'm absolutely in horror when I see 700 pages of attachments to papers. Now, I would think, and I've been the executive officer to ministerial committees and other bits and pieces, if I, as that officer, put those up, I wouldn't be at a job. I think the part of the CEO's role is to help manage an appropriate workload for councillors and give them documents that you don't have to resort to paying for $1 million for AI to sort of help wade it out. What's your view on the sort of quality of those papers that you get and the volume of reading that you're expected to do?
Couldn't have said it better myself. The the depth of clarity of reading you've got to do is astounding. And that's the one thing that would probably scare anyone off if they've seen the size of papers. I remember former councillor John Kotlash actually tripped over his papers once in his living room because of how tall the bundle was. And so there's so much reading to do, and you've got to have a really good system. There's been weekends where I've just stayed in because all I can do is read. And you've got to digest it all. You can't just simply read it. You've got to actually understand it and digest it to be able to ask those sensible questions that get better answers. The thing that I would like to see happen is I would like to see the length of time between the council business paper being issued and the meeting extended, which it did happen before they threw the rules
Friday
out.
to Tuesday's a bit rough, isn't it?
It's and at least having
Thursday,
a week
whichever.
between public deputations and then the meeting gives you so much more extra time to absorb it further, which I think is beneficial because you've got more time to not only absorb, but read and possibly change your viewpoint. Because your first viewpoint might be, this is completely bonkers. But after a couple of different reads, you might go, okay, I can see where that point is. So not necessarily the volume, like, sure, reduce the volume, that'd be great. But sometimes you do need 700 pages to make the point, which is quite a substantial issue we're dealing with. And this goes back 2-3 years. So
I'll go to Maree, but I'll say as a professional public servant who had the role pretty like some of the unfortunate council staff that have to deal with me, I know exactly the language that I'd be using with me, and they do it sometimes even better than I do it because it comes back with this obscure fog that you get. And I see that often in the papers that go to the meetings, that there's these words that you go, there's 90 words there that mean, turn right. You go, look, I didn't need the 90 words. But anyway, Maree, I might ask you any contribution there that we might wrap it up.
First of all, I just want to cycle back. You were making a very good point about going out to where the community lives and the Indigenous group of the round circle, a yarning circle, whatever. It's such an important point in our communities because I think there are councillors out there that don't get enough out into the communities. And if they do, it's so staged that it becomes not a two-way communication tool. I believe our committees, I don't know about yours, but ours certainly feature way too many bureaucrats, a few other councillors, and not enough community being able to speak their language. So congratulations for bringing that one up. That's the first thing. I think it's really important. And as to the loads and loads of business papers, absolutely. There are some quarterly reports and big reports about a big project, a town plan, whatever the case may be. They're necessary. But mostly it's also a tactic to bury you in order that you don't get your ducks in a row to be able to ask the hard questions. And we can't resolve from that. And now the briefings are gone as well. And they were at least a tool where we could sit around the table with the directors and the staff and actually ask a question that we found really hard to understand. That, I think, is lost to councillors now. It's brutal.
And I can't express that point clearly enough. The briefings were such a powerful tool because you could sit around with your 13 or your 12 other colleagues and you could ask the dumb question. And the thing that really irked me the most about briefings going is that the minister just said, just ask a dumb question in the meeting. The community doesn't see you as asking a dumb question as being a smart individual. They see you as being, you're quite dumb. That dumb question does need to be asked. There are so many times where I would ask that question and we would have a giggle in the briefing, but it was somebody had asked the question that everyone was thinking and nobody had the answer to. So by asking that question, and that it was a safe space. And I won't ask that question publicly because I will have to find other ways to get that information because there is no way I'll ask a completely bonkers question on the floor of council and just be shot at by the community saying, oh, look at this numpty, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And so I think the briefings did give that structure. Yes, there were some briefings that definitely needed to be open to the public because they needed to see what was going on. But I really do miss and did value, and I thought the class of 21 did it quite well. We sat around at a table and we talked about stuff that was really controversial and we actually got some really good gains. And so you would see in the last council term meetings, we actually had some really good robust debate because we had gone through and got the evidence beforehand.
Okay, I'm going to help wrap this up. There's two things, Matthew, that I'm going to ask you and we'll see how that goes. So what's the main issue on which Shoalhaven ratepayers should judge your performance at the next election? Part one, and if you can cope with part two, because I know you're a smart guy. Why should Ward 1 voters support Matthew Norris again rather than a new Labor candidate or an independent or a candidate from wherever. So is that okay? You want me to go back?
I think the thing they should judge me on is my transparency and my honesty. I'm happy to call it a spade, even when it looks like a shovel. I'm happy to call it a spade. And I'm happy to make sure that communication is forthcoming. I've never been one to back away. I haven't been a great communicator, I admit that. But there are times where I feel that I do call that bluntness in some of my deliveries there on council. So I hope that I have been a good communicator. I hope that I can be a better communicator. It's always something I've got to work on. But I hope I've delivered the stuff that they've wanted me to deliver. And I think if I have delivered what they want me to deliver, if I have such things like the mowing schedule, that went around for months and months before I bashed my hands on the desk and said, we need to get this done. The community wants this. And so I think if I can be judged on the little wins, because at the moment it's really just the little fundamental wins that I think I've really achieved, I think that'll move the needle. And if I'm asking Ward 1 supporters to support me again, it's because I'm a known quantity. I'm a known quantity. I am pretty level-headed. I don't rock the boat too much with too much craziness. And I think that I'm at least a stable hand on the tiller. I've got a couple of seasons under my belt, if you're going to look at it like a football analogy. I've been there for a little while to earn my apprenticeship. And I think if I choose to go on, we haven't made the decision yet, but if I choose to go on, maybe it's worth keeping me around for my longevity there.
This next part of the interview was caught up in a lot of dropout with the internet, so it's a bit out of place, but I did manage to get this bit back. The question was about what happened when Councillor Clancy replaced Matthew Norris as the Assistant Deputy Mayor.
Well, the first thing is I got a job that was meant to be a bit casual and turned into a bit full-time. So, I did run out of time in my own personal life to commit fully to the role. And, Councillor Clancy probably has more time to be able to commit to the role. And so, good for her for taking it on. But what happened to the numbers, I couldn't tell you. I mean, it's always a tricky time around the call meeting, which is what we call the meeting when we all change roles. It's always a tricky time and people are always jostling for positions in the role.
I'm just really happy that you were first cab off the rank, Matthew. I think this sort of discussion lets people see a real councillor, which is often not what people get to see. They get to see a few grabs on the media or they get to see a few grabs at a council meeting. And I think this has certainly opened up a lot of people's minds to who you are. And I agree, the integrity and the transparency is key here. And you've demonstrated that this evening, and I congratulate you for that.
And being a fellow who judges everybody, Judge Dredge, I think, Matthew, you did right. What I've seen even over this term is certainly a much more polished, not in the sense of being smarmy polished, but certainly in a sense of delivery, hitting the issues on the head. Yeah, so I think you did right, that you are a known quantity and you have delivered on that. We'll go to you for your closing comments, but we've got an open invite to any councillor, anyone who wants to come on and talk, because I think this will be of value to the community and it's a bit longer form and gives some value. So over to you for the sort of see you later, mate. And any comments you've got about the format and how it went?
As a millennial podcaster, my thing these days, this kind of interaction, this kind of vibe is better than what we can normally do in our 5-minute speeches in the chamber. And you'll know from seeing my contributions in the chamber, I've only got a short time to say something. So having a bit more longer format to have a discussion with people, it exposes a bit more of me and people can see a bit more of how I actually come to that rationale. So I really like what you guys are doing with the format of bringing this perspective to the eye. I can't wait to see some of the other councillors. And I would really urge some of the non or the SIG councillors to give it a go, because Steve and Maree are just trying to put your voice out there. And if you feel that you've been misrepresented, this is the opportunity to put your voice out there. So I'd really encourage everyone to give it a chance. But yeah, I'd happily put my hand up for coming back for another one if you feel I've not shared enough or shared too much.
Thank you very much for being the first one off the rank. And we can guarantee to any of the councillors that you'll get exactly the same treatment. This isn't a gotcha show. This is a chance for people to come on and explain themselves. You will get a general tone of what we're going to talk about. So there's no too many surprise, maybe no surprises. If you're prepared, it should be quite straightforward. So Matthew, thank you for your time. Thank you for being the first one off the rank, and hopefully it'll go well. Maree, thank you for your insight from your previous council experience. And of course, as my very valued partner on the podcast. So thank you all from the chamber, and we'll see you soon, hopefully with another erudite and student politically smart on the show. Thank you.
Another giddy up from the gallery. Bye now.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew.
Ciao.
Thanks, guys.